Hi, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome, post-mortem edition, maybe. Um, you know, Bob, that game, I say it in the teaser for the opening for the show. Basically, the Baltimore Ravens took the Saints out behind the Superdome in a back alley, took their lunch money, gave them an atomic wedgie, bent him over, and kicked him in the ass face first into a whole row of garbage cans. And that's what that game basically was. You and I were talking right before we went on air. I can only think of a couple of games. The Seattle games playing in Seattle, the 2010, 2014, and even the playoff game in was it 2013? I think it was January 2014, the playoff game where Marcus Colson tried to throw that pass,
Yeah.
Opposite the field. And then I think one in 20, was it 2016? Maybe I don't remember. We played Seattle again, but basically where the Saints got out hit, out muscled, just physically whipped. And the Saints staff knew it, and they tried to trick them instead of just matching their physicality.
That's 100% accurate, and that Seattle team was built a lot like this Baltimore Ravens team, a very physical, rugged defense, predicated on pressuring opposing backfield, not necessarily quarterbacks, but just bringing extra defenders at opposing backfields. Offensively, not much of a passing game to speak of, but they needed to run the ball at you. For any chance of success. And that's exactly what the Ravens did. They did it with a two-headed running back, and I said it, running back combination of Kenyon Drake and Lamar Jackson. And they did it successfully. I think in the matter of just me speaking that sentence, a Ravens ball carrier broke 6 more Saints tackle attempts.
Yeah, that was probably one of the most disappointing things about it, because we seem to have, over the past few weeks, gotten over the bad tackling. We've improved our tackling. We have done a much better job at not giving up the big play and things like that. And yet, this seemed like a giant step backwards. This looked like this looked like the Carolina game. It looked like the Minnesota game in London. It just seemed like we were missing so many tackles. And I get it. Lamar Jackson's a big guy, hard to bring down, but the arm tackling and, throwing the shoulder instead of just wrapping up and driving these guys in the dirt. I want to say something that's somewhat controversial. I think if you're a running quarterback, you should be treated like a running back, less than a quarterback. And there's no such thing as roughing the passer anymore. You can go low to cut their knees out from under them like you would a running back or a wide receiver. It's not because the Saints got flagged for roughing the pass by going low on. What I'm saying is basically, if you like to run as a quarterback, you are basically at a protected running back.
Yep.
And when somebody the size of Lamar Jackson, there's such a small area that you can hit somebody. It's different hitting a Tom Brady versus a Lamar Jackson. It just is. And I know why the league doesn't want to do this, because the league likes their stars. You can see it is the money. You can see, listen to that broadcast with Aikman and Buck, and I have not missed those clowns at all.
Hell no.
But you listen to Aikman and Buck, and the first quarter, Lamar Jackson on offense, big letters across the center of the screen with the first Ravens offensive series. When the Saints come up, there's a picture of Andy Dalton and a picture of Kamara, Saints offense coming up.
Yep.
I mean, that's how this game is. That's how this game's played. And if you're a star quarterback, they want that guy up there. They do not want to see what happened to Randall Cunningham back in, what was it, 80? No, 91. 'Cause that's the year the Saints played the Eagles, and they had like two different. They had Pat Ryan and Brad Aesop's Gables. That's what Brad Gables playing quarterback. They don't want to see what happened to Randall Cunningham in Green Bay in that Week 1 first possession where his knee
No.
got blown out and he's carted off, and the Eagles season's basically over. They don't want that. They want to have those money games. You want to see those stars play. But
Yeah, but Alan, I'll agree with you. Yeah, and it's obvious that that's what the league wants. But yeah, because of the extra protective way that they guard the quarterback position in particular. Yeah, and yeah, it's certain names, certain players, much more than others. Uh, I actually think that you're a fool if you don't gear your offense around a running quarterback because you
absolutely.
know that defenses can barely touch these guys. Yeah, and it's so frustrating to watch because this Goodell league is not even close to
No,
football.
no.
And I know we sound like a couple of our guys, a couple of guys yelling at people to get off of our lawns, but I don't care. It's fact of the matter.
Hmm.
But I'll say this too. I thought for the first quarter and a half, the Saints defense played encouraging football. They were still missing some tackles, not nearly as much as they were in the latter stages of the
Yeah.
game, but they were flying around the field. They were aggressive. They looked pretty confident. But by halftime, I thought coming off of the field, and it was only 14-3, but it might as well have been 140-3 the way that these guys looked.
Yeah.
I thought that the look in their eyes on both sides, but especially the defenders is where I noticed it. This team looked like a demoralized, defeated bunch. And I felt coming out of halftime, unless they got an immediate turnover, and although they stopped the Ravens from scoring a touchdown, uh, unless they got an immediate turnover and cashed it in for an
Hmm.
immediate touchdown, that they were going to lose this game in much of the same manner that they did.
Yeah. That was that that final drive before halftime. Marquez Callaway. I want to say Marcus Colston,
Mm.
not. But when Callaway dropped that touchdown pass, and granted, it wasn't a great throw by Dalton, I give him that. But it hit you in the hands. I've seen other receivers make those catches.
Yep.
You know, you would have made it 14-7, giving yourself a little momentum. Now, granted, the Ravens are taking the ball in the second half, but 14-7 did not seem insurmountable. 14-3 did, because it's an 11-point lead that the Cardinals held almost the whole time. This is
Hmm.
not a team designed to come back. Um, I just I think the thing that bothered me the most was, and we talked about this off the air too. Early in that ball game, Saints first possession, it's 3rd and 1. We are 13 of 14 converting third or one or less, mainly because of Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill's not even on the field on 3rd and 1. And what happens? We try and run a trick play basically with Dwayne Washington, not even Alvin Kamara, and as a result, it's a loss and we
Yep.
have to punt. And from that point on, I felt like the Ravens just controlled that game. Um, and really, what prevented the Ravens from getting more points, some of it was bad passing by Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
Some of it was just flat out bad execution by the Ravens. Very thankful for that. I mean, that one play where Cam Jordan almost sacked him, he rolls out and just flings that ball as far as he can throw it, and it's just off the fingertips of a receiver. I don't even know who it was. I think it was that guy, likely. I'm not sure who that was that was down there, but still, it was just the game was much more dominated than the score would indicate. I mean, 27-13, and that final touchdown was really. It sounded like somebody thought a whistle had blown because the Ravens players stopped, and uh, Juwan Johnson just kept running.
Mhm.
You know, so it was that physical of a domination. A lot of people on social media want to fire Dennis Allen now. You know, it's so funny. Was locked into such presentism, and I learned this word a few weeks ago, and I love it. But we're trapped as prisoners of the moment.
Mhm.
And what's happening right now, right this second, we're either 16-0 or 0-16. We're in the 0-16 phase now.
Mhm.
Dennis Allen needs to be fired. Mickey Loomis needs to go. We need to blow up the roster, trade everybody. And last week we were saying, man, you can't get Alvin Kamara. See, Alvin Kamara wants to be here. He's a leader. He took the bull by the horns. He walked the walk after he talked the talk. It's just it's how do you deal with that? How would you deal with presentism?
It's very frustrating. And frustrating is a nice F word to put on it.
Yeah.
It's extremely infuriating. First of all, folks, Dennis Allen is not going to be fired before the end of the season. Now, I'll tell you this. I am slowly starting to come around to the possibility that Dennis might be on the chopping block after the year if this season completely goes down the drain. And it could start with a loss to a very bad Pittsburgh Steelers team, this Sunday. You could see this season completely bottom out. Even at 3-6, it hasn't yet. But if this team finishes, say, 5-12, playing the way that they did last night, or the way that they have in a few of their losses this year, I think it's a possibility that Dennis Allen and therefore most of the coaching staff, could be let go at the end of the year. But I'm not ready to have that conversation yet, and I know, I know you aren't either. The reality is that this is the deck of cards that the Saints are playing with this year. Dennis Allen is your coach. Pete Carmichael is your offensive coordinator. The players on the field are the players on the field. They're not gonna sign any miraculous free agent to turn things around. The trading deadline is come and gone. Not that they had any ammunition to swing any deals in the first place. This is the deck of cards that the Saints are going to play with the rest of the way. And maybe they sneak into the playoffs. Maybe they end up 5-12. The reality is, I think it's somewhere in between at this point. But folks, there's not going to be any wholesale changes. And although I just acknowledge the possibility that there could be some big moves at the end of the year, at the same time, with Mickey Loomis as general manager and with the Benson family as ownership, they've shown the propensity to patience more than the word that the other P word that you've just used.
Yeah. Well, people have this tunnel vision. Okay, it's the Saints. That's who they watch. It's the Saints. And that's fine. I mean, most people who watch other games, I think, tend to watch them either to see how it benefits or helps the Saints, hurts the Saints, or fantasy football. They're watching the player. I tried to watch some football this weekend, and if you watch that Rams Bucks game, that was horrible football.
Yeah, it was.
And those two teams have a lot of talent on both sides.
Aging, but yeah.
Aging, yes, but they still have a lot of talent. Tom Brady with the Buccaneers couldn't get in the end zone. They couldn't score a touchdown. I'm going to clean this up to make this analogy family oriented. On a troop ship coming to port, if the Bucks were a troop ship coming to port, they couldn't score if you gave them prostitutes. Let's just leave it at that, because there's a much cruder way of putting this with a lot more P's involved in it. But yeah,
Working girls.
working girls, yeah, but they couldn't score any if if they were a troop ship coming into port after 2 weeks offshore. I mean, that was a terrible offense. Receivers dropped touchdown passes that Brady put right in their hands. Terrible play calling. They couldn't run the ball. So when you watch the Saints have their fair share of problems. I know a lot of people are like, who cares? That's good. The Bucs are losing. I'm glad the Bucs are losing. I'm glad the Bucs are losing too. I'm glad they're losing with Tom Brady.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see Tom Brady's career ending this way, because this is the only way he's going to leave. He is not a guy who knows when to step away. He is a guy that has to kind of get shoved out of it. And I don't mind seeing that. But that being said, Sean McVay is supposed to be this genius coach. What kind of 2-minute defense was that? What kind of 2-minute offense was that? They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't throw the ball. They're running plunges into the line. There's no attempt at trickery, no attempt at anything to get a first down. He wants to rely on his defense, and he gave them that touchdown.
Yep.
They're playing 30 yards off, and all they need is a touchdown to score. Then you commit pass interference in the end zone. I mean, it was terrible. So you're going to rip on Dennis, and I'm only saying this because if you're ripping on Dennis Allen for a bad coach, you're ripping on the Saints for not being prepared properly. Go watch some of these football games that were played this weekend. That Carolina Cincinnati game, it was on, I think it was on Fox, the first game at noon. I turned it off, went to the Jets Buffalo game, because that's how bad that game was. Okay.
And by the way, the almighty Buffalo Bills look very, very ordinary.
Absolutely.
You're talking about the Tampa Bay offense. Remember their offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich was a very, very hot coaching commodity this offseason. Kansas City's offense with the almighty Eric Bieniemy, they don't look the same. They're putting up numbers because of superhuman efforts by Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And we can go on and on and on and on and on. But those are just some of the hottest or most respected offensive minds in the game that we're talking about here.
Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. You lost to friggin' Detroit, 15-6. It's just, you see it played out over and over again. So people are like, okay, we got to get rid of Dennis Allen. Who are you going to replace him with?
That's it.
Who are you going to replace him with? Before you say anybody, look long and hard at these teams that are out there playing with these offensive-minded coaches and with offensive talent.
Denver, Nathaniel Hackett.
Nathaniel Hackett. Good. Josh McDaniels over there, who I think is a clown anyway. But Josh McDaniels in Oakland or Las Vegas. I knew I'd mess it up. The Chargers. That's supposed to be an offensive-minded coach.
Frank Reich and the Colts.
Frank Reich got fired, and I think that's what kind of fed that.
Yeah.
John, we're going to bring Sean Payton back. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's why Sean Payton is going to be a hot name, because there's going to be a lot of coaches. I would not be surprised to see a third of the coaches in the NFL fired this year.
Same.
And that's a big number. We've already seen 2 of them go down. If 10 of them go down, that's roughly a third. I would not be surprised to see Houston fire their coach. Just because I think they felt the pressure to bring in, and it's really not fair to him, but they felt the pressure to bring in. I just forgot his name. I can picture him, Lovie Smith. They felt the pressure to bring him in, given all the drama that unfolded this year. this off season with Brian Flores in Florida and stuff like that, in Miami and all that stuff. And speaking of which, Miami, although that guy looks retarded, I know it's not a politically correct word anymore, but he does. He looks like he was a special kid in school. I don't know if it's the glasses, the bad hairline, or what it is, but he does. What's his name? McDaniel, Mike
Mhm.
McDaniel.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like because it's something about his face, and I don't want to be. I'm not trying to be ugly, but it's like you know how some people have. You hear girls have resting bitch face. You know,
Yeah.
pissed off. He's got resting retarded face, and John Butler's gonna. That's going to be John Butler's thing. He does though. He looks like Napoleon Dynamite is what comes to mind when you look. If Napoleon Dynamite had a bad hairline and wore Jeffrey Dahmer's glasses for
Yeah.
Netflix special, that's what this dude would look like. You know, I mean, I'm just saying. It's just he looks. Yeah, I know. I'm being really politically incorrect because I actually enjoy watching Miami right now. But every time they show that coach, I'm like, I'm sorry. He looks like when he was a kid, he got his daily beatings. They stuffed him in the lockers and stuff. You know, that was not a popular person in school when he was a kid. I don't know. And maybe that's why he didn't recognize the concussion symptoms into it.
Maybe.
He's like, I used to get beat about the head for 7 periods every day. I don't know what's wrong with him. It's got to be a bad back. Here we go. 3 things I learned on the Dome Podcast. It's been a while since we've done that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sean, I'm sorry I have no new updates on Sean. I apologize. I have not gotten any responses to any of my inquiries. I need to just call a hospital myself and see if I can talk to him because uh, he hasn't responded. I don't know if he even has his phone, but he hasn't responded to anything that I've sent out to him. And I know hospitals are terrible for phones, but yeah, if Sean would have heard these comments, Sean be falling out of the chair laughing. Um, but yeah, going back to my initial question, who would you hire to replace Dennis Allen? Because I just don't see that coach out there or that staff out there that's putting together a great team. And don't tell me the Eagles. Um, but I just don't see that staff out there that's putting together this great, unique system. Um, that you have coaches that, this is the guy we need to have. This is the guy who's coaching under a Hall of Fame coach like Sean Payton was with Bill Parcells, and you can see the growth in that offense. So you can see the growth in that team.
Mhm.
I just don't see it, and I think that's going to fuel a lot of this stuff um, with decisions on whether to keep Dennis Allen. I think if they have any kind of conversation, I'm going to get your opinion on this too. I think if they have any kind of conversation, they make Dennis Allen fire some assistant coaches,
Mhm.
sacrificial lambs. I mean, can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've thought that from like week 2 or 3. That and yeah, the biggest issue that I have, the biggest 2 issues that I have with these coaches so far, from a strategy aspect, is Pete Carmichael and that entire offense. Now I've given credit to Pete. Before last night, I thought that he has done a magnificent job of devising his running game plan, or rushing game plans. Um, but outside of that, the offense for the most part lacks imagination. It lacks a newer imaginative feel. And as far as Dennis Allen, I think Dennis Allen's issue is there's too many hands in the defensive cookie jar. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they already announced that. They had already announced during the preseason, before the preseason, that Chris Richard and Ryan Nielsen will be co-defensive coordinators. That was red flag number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately followed by red flag number 2, which was Allen himself saying, "But I'm still going to be in charge of the defensive signals." All right, DA, let's wait a minute here.
Yeah.
You failed in your first attempt as a head coach. Now, granted, it was with a dysfunctional franchise with a zero talent on that team. But one of the things that we have seen from coaches who have been failures in their first stints, Mike Shanahan, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, was all of those guys took a back seat to game day play calling to leave it up to coordinators. So why? They could get a pulse for the entire thing. Dennis Allen apparently has not learned from that. So, yeah, I see two things coming. I see a whole new offensive staff, and I see a more simplified approach to the defensive coaching. Chris Richard or Ryan Nielsen may be the defensive coordinator. It won't be both. And Dennis Allen won't be in charge of the defense any longer. Those are the two major things that I see, along with, like you suggested, some of the other lower tiered assistants being having their heads on the chopping block.
Yeah, I can see Pete Carmichael, like we talked about earlier, retiring because I don't think he wanted to be offensive coordinator at all. I think he really
he said as much.
Yeah, I think he wanted to be I think he wanted to be just quarterbacks coach, or I think he wanted to be just an offensive assistant, but not offensive coordinator. And I think it's not because he lacks the ability to come up with a creative game plan. This is what was said about Joe Brady when Joe Brady was the coordinator in Carolina, and to a lesser extent when he was with LSU, because now people want to credit Ensminger at LSU more than Brady, which I think is kind of silly because Brady's the one that introduced these Saints offensive concepts at a collegiate level. And of course, he had the elite talent with a Joe Burrow, John Jefferson. Oh my God, I'm going back to the Chargers. Jefferson and I just forgot the other guy, the other receiver they had there. But and Randy Moss's kid at tight end and all that stuff. He had the talent there that was smart enough to understand the concepts he was explaining that the Saints like to run, and it made sense to them. And college defenses, complete with the wider hash marks, just had a hard time comprehending that and covering that kind of stuff because the talent was there, high-end talent. But when Joe Brady got to Carolina, now he had to call a game. And what separates a guy like Sean Payton from a guy like Pete Carmichael and Joe Brady, or I'll even throw in Shanahan's kid over there in Atlanta. McVay, to an extent, not completely. Mike Martz was another one. You can come up with a great system, but it's about when to call those plays. Peyton had an uncanny gut feel. It wasn't always right. I'm not going to say it was. But he had an uncanny gut feel of knowing when to call the right play for the right situation and exploit a defense. And of course, you had Drew Brees executing this for him. But it's just your play. It's about when to call that play, and that's what did it. That's really what did it. Okay, so people talk about Taysom, probably because I got my Taysom Hill jersey on. But Taysom Hill was once again, underutilized, criminally underutilized in this game. They never fell far enough behind that I felt like they had to abandon going to Taysom like they did in Arizona. Why do you think they didn't incorporate Taysom more?
Because they coached afraid. Like we said early in the show, like we said, before we logged on to the show. That's the coaches. People that want to come down on the coaches. you're doing so as usual. You're doing so for the wrong reasons. The coaches didn't miss these tackles on defense. The coaches didn't commit the penalties on offense or whiff on blocks along the offensive line. Which, by the way, I thought Cesar Ruiz played an excellent football game, but that's another story. It was plays like three different. Well, I think one was a second and short, and then two different third and shorts. You had Taysom Hill in the backfield, folks. Everybody knows 95% of the time when Taysom Hill is in the backfield, he's going to get the snap and he's going to do a power run, whether it's to the left or the right. They were so afraid of the Ravens that on those three aforementioned plays, Taysom didn't do that any of those times.
Yeah.
Two of them, they tried to run this prissy ass misdirection to try to fool the Ravens, and didn't even do the misdirection with your best offensive player, Alvin Kamara. They did it with your special teams captain, Dwayne Washington.
Yeah.
So, why did they feel this way? I don't know, because they've averaged 160 yards on the ground in Andy Dalton's previous starts.
Yeah.
Yesterday, they ran the ball. They attempted 13 rushes. 15 technically, but two of those were scrambles by Dalton. 13. And like you said, Alan, they were until like midway through the fourth quarter, when they pretty much had to pass the ball for any chance, they were never in a position where they had to abandon the run. They chose to because they didn't feel like their players could match up with the Ravens players. That's coaching scared.
Yeah. I completely agree with you that 3rd and 1 play, like I talked about earlier, you're 13 of 14 and 3rd and 1 or less for the season. That's an amazing statistic. And the 14th was it was only because you had no timeouts left and you couldn't really convert the first down via the ground because you would have run out of time. You were in field goal range, so you try to throw another pass to get a little bit closer. So that's really the only one that didn't convert. And so I'm going to give a Mickey on that one. I'm going to give him a pass.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, you've got to run. I don't mind seeing Taysom throw the ball out of those plays. He threw one. It was a pretty pass, a nice completion for a first down. You want to do that, keep them honest. But, yeah, they're playing with 11 guys in the box early on downs because they know that Andy Dalton doesn't really get that ball up that high, and that's why they had their hands up and batted as many passes as they did. And it was only a matter of time before they threw an interception off a batted pass because they were getting them pretty good, it's Calvin's loving it. Calvin says, "Thank you." The coach, they did coach scared. They did. I was at that LSU game Saturday night, and I'm not a Brian Kelly fan.
Me either.
But he did not coach scared.
Nope.
He went for 2 in overtime and ran the same play. Alabama called timeout to reset their defense because they saw the alignment. He ran the same play anyway and got it. That's not coaching scared. That's coaching. That's like we said, the whole hour and a half it took for us to get home after that game. 100,000 people leaving the stadium at one time. You're going to sit in traffic for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But, we said multiple times in that game, on the way home from that game, if you don't get that 2-point conversion, he drops the ball or they pick it off or knock it down. Kelly is an idiot. Kelly got greedy. Kelly got stupid. You never go for 2 at that point. You take the points, play for another overtime, go for 2 when you have to, all that stuff. But when he got it, you're listening to the drunks calling and the people on the post game, the normal people on the post game show saying, "I wouldn't have called it, but that's why I'm not making X amount of millions of dollars to make those decisions," and it paid off, and the fans love him for it.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Allen needs to learn something from that. Sean Payton never coached scared. He did. We can go back to a couple of those games, but for the most part, he never coached scared.
No.
You don't call ambush in the Super Bowl if you're going to coach scared. So and there's other instances when he did that. I just when you said that earlier tonight, I just never really thought of it that way. But yeah, you're right. They did. I felt like they just lacked confidence in what they do. So they were trying to avoid that by, I don't know, somehow tricking the Ravens into getting points.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with trying to fool the other team. But when your entire game plan, and it was clear that this was the case, when your entire game plan is geared towards avoiding physical confrontations with the Ravens, avoiding physical, one-on-one battles with the Ravens, to me, that if I'm a player, that tells me that my coaches don't have any confidence in me to do this job, because this game plan doesn't have any of the things that we have done successfully over the last 4 or 5 games. And offensively, this team has played pretty well over the previous month, but they didn't do any of those things last night. They didn't attempt to do it. It's one thing if you attempt to do all your best plays with your best players and you lose. That happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing when you don't, when you chuck everything that you've done best because you're out, you're either A, outsmarting yourself, or B, so afraid of the other team that you don't think your guys can beat them.
Yeah. And it is true. The Saints have never beaten the Ravens at home. They haven't played them that much, but they're now, counting last night, they're now 6-2. The Ravens are versus the Saints. I want those kind of teams. I enjoy going against a physical team because I like getting physical right back at them.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, you're trying to avoid the costly mistakes, but I wouldn't have mind seeing, a couple of big hits out there. And yeah, you're going to get the flags going, but you set the thing. The thing that was pissing me off too was, the shoulder tackling and the arm tackling. I wanted to see somebody wrap somebody up and drive them into the turf, pick them up and drive them into the turf, and you might get a flag for it and stuff like that. And if they stand up pushing you, you push right back, and your team rallies and gets in their face and points them, and it becomes this big ugly scrum. But I want to see that kind of stuff because you're not scared. You don't think much of this team, and you tell them that I don't think much of you as a football team. And I felt like that's what the Ravens were doing to us. And the longer that game went on, the more confident the Ravens got that they could impose their will on the Saints. So by the fourth quarter, they were imposing their will, both on the offensive and defensive lines.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Kenyon Drake, who's a nice back, but he's a journeyman. He's a third string back for the Baltimore Ravens. He had 80 yards rushing. He had 80 yards rushing in the second half because he was breaking, I don't know, 4 or 5 tackle attempts every single time. The offensive line, looked like they quit in the second half because they were just getting physically whipped on every single play. They were being outmaneuvered too. The Ravens were bringing extra rushers in. In part because that's A, their style, but also B, they didn't have any respect for the Saints receivers outside of Chris Olave, which is another story in and of itself. But the Saints didn't really have the personnel to adjust to that. Other than when you were still in the game, you run the ball. You audible and you run away from those extra rushers because it was clear that the Ravens were overloading one side or another. Now they were stunning and twisting and bringing those guys inside, but it was still very clear that it was on an unbalanced line. And the Saints, again, a failure to adjust. And like you said, it reached a point very quickly where the Ravens just had physical control of the game, and the Saints couldn't do anything about it.
No, I mean, let's look at the other field
She
goal
needs to.
play when it's third down. The Saints got five. I think they're in 11 personnel, maybe 12. No, they're 11 personnel. Okay, so you've got the tight end now a little bit away from the line, lined up as a receiver, and you've got four receivers and you've got a back. Okay, so I'm sorry, three receivers and a back. You're out there ready to run a bunch of pass routes, and Marlon Humphreys comes in unblocked and gets Dalton for a sack, and they have to settle for a field goal as a result of that. It's Dalton's fault for not seeing it, pointing
Mm-hmm.
out and getting audible on it. And so Trotman changes and now becomes a blocker who chips before he releases just for that particular play. And probably
Yep.
Marlon doesn't come if he hears the audible. But you still chipped or reset the protection because you see a blitz coming. And the receivers also know to change their routes, shorten their routes, do whatever it takes so he gets rid of the ball quickly. Um, that was a mistake by Dalton, a big one, and it cost him 4 points because you possibly could get a touchdown on that drive. And again, now you're talking 10-14 or 7-17, I think it was at that point. You're still within a one-score game,
Mm-hmm.
but you made those mistakes, and the Ravens knew it. So they knew those overload blitzes were going to work. It was just like what they saw Atlanta do to them, and
Yeah.
it's like we never learned how to change from that. Um, Nightwell,
A little embarrassed now.
it, it just got to be very frustrating because there was nothing special I thought the Ravens did. We just could not answer the bell.
Yeah, you're right. And going back to what you were saying about Dalton, you specified that one play, but there was another sack where I sat there and said the same exact thing. I'm like, he's a veteran quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to recognize this. Yeah, and there was there were two other throws where he wasn't sacked, but he was hurried and forced into bad throws. Now I was watching Olave on one of those should have made the read and adjusted his route.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Dalton needs to pick that up. One of the reasons why we think that has been inserted over Jameis Winston as a starting quarterback is because of this so-called veteran experience. And he sees these things and he recognizes them and he can adjust to them and he can audible into the right play call or get his players into the right position. We didn't see any of that last night, none at all.
No, and it was like this was Dalton's first start.
Yeah.
All the things that we saw him do against even teams that he lost to, Minnesota and the Cardinals, he was still making adjustments and still doing things to make himself more successful, taking underneath throws and making the right reads to get the ball into the right player's hands. And none of that happened. It was like, it was a lot like a weak armed white version of Jameis Winston in the first couple of games. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, with the tip passes, the taking of the sacks, the not being able to handle the blitz and running the play as called and not changing out of the play, that's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm following Saints Twitter, which is a dumb thing to do during a game, but I was frustrated with this game anyway, so I thought I'd really look at Twitter and make it even worse. But people are like, they should put Jameis in now. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, I'm like, at no point in this game am I thinking to myself, what this offense is missing? A deep pass every now and then. I'm like, damn, we can't even complete a short pass.
Right.
I'm ready for a deep pass. If anything, I wanted to see if I was going to make a quarterback change, and I hate to say this because I know his limitations, but I'm going to put Taysom in there and let Taysom Lamar Jackson to these guys.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Um, you know, because I felt like if anything, we needed to have a long, sustaining drive, rest our defense, um, get their defense worn out, so they
Hmm.
stopped blitzing so much. When they went to when they even went to a hurry up or a slow huddle, which is really no huddle offense, but you're standing there and you're yelling, you're making all the calls at the line. I felt like that kind of put the Ravens a little bit on their heels because it caught them off on their personnel changes and things. That's how they got that field goal. That's how they got the second field goal
Hmm.
too. That's the kind of stuff I wanted to see. Just somebody to control the tempo of the game. Um, Shaheed, I don't know if he did have a couple targets. I think I have to go back and look at the stats.
I
I know,
remember one target. Well, he was in the vicinity.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think when I looked back over the stat, because I chart plays during the game, and then I compare it to Pro Football Reference to make sure that I didn't miss anything after the
Mhm.
fact. And I think I saw that Shaheed officially was targeted twice. But yeah, he wasn't in the lineup very much at all. They went with Traquan and Marquez Callaway along with Kevin White this game rather than Shaheed.
Yeah, yeah. There was one pass I think he caught, and it was for a loss. Um, and he wasn't very good in the return game either. He
No.
wasn't very imaginative in the return game. He was running straight into the line. I think only one time did he actually take it outside and got some yardage, and then they
Mhm.
ended up having a punt. But yeah, it's one of those things that when I it's just nothing was working right. Um, I really, I go back to I was watching the Chiefs Titans game, and the Titans are basically playing with 10 men because their quarterback is basically his job is to hand off because he's not a passer, especially not now. He may one day become somewhat of a passer, but he's not a passer.
Mhm.
He's way too raw. Um, so his job is just to hand off to Derrick Henry all game. And the whole time I know who Derrick Henry is like a grown up Earl Campbell for this generation.
Mhm.
But I kept thinking the whole time, I said, this is what the Saints are really missing. They're missing a power back to go along with Kamara. And it doesn't have to be a Derrick Henry, but it does need to be if Dennis Allen is going to survive and go next year into being a coach and we're going to go to a different scheme or a new scheme, part of that is going to have to become a power running game because I think that's what he's more comfortable with. And to do that, he needs power backs, big
Yes.
back. And AJ Dillon is somebody I'm thinking of from Green Bay, someone like that, because you're not going to get a franchise quarterback next year. Um, I don't think Winston will be here. In fact, I can almost guarantee Winston won't be here.
No.
Um,
If he had a shot at being here, he'd be the starting quarterback right now. That's the way I'd
right,
look at it.
exactly, exactly. He may come back and become the starter again. I don't know. Allen may give Dalton one more chance versus the Steelers and maybe starts Winston against the Rams. If Dalton just totally stinks it up again, but Dalton may be back because I think he signed a 2-year deal, but as a backup. But I think they go find some journeyman quarterback, probably somebody who can start. I mean, I know you hate this name, but Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be out there, and that may be a guy that Allen feels comfortable with.
Yeah, Garoppolo could be out there. The Raiders have a potential buyout of Derek Carr's contract that could put him out there. That's a name I'm actually watching very
That is a
closely.
name I would be willing to go after, and I'll tell you why. 90% I think of the Raiders' problems is Josh McDaniels.
Hell yeah.
Um, I, Derek Carr is not a franchise quarterback, but he is a quarterback who can execute any offense that you want to run and execute it well enough that if you surround him with good pieces, and you see that with Josh Jacobs, but you surround him with some good pieces, and the Saints have enough of those pieces that you possibly can do something with him.
Mhm.
So I would not be opposed to having Derek Carr come in here.
Not at all. I look at Derek Carr same way I've looked at Matthew Stafford throughout his career. And I know Stafford was the number 1 overall draft choice, but I've never viewed Matthew Stafford as a Hall of Fame franchise quarterback. He could be a long-term answer, just like Carr, with the right pieces around him, perhaps even a championship quarterback. Carr is a name that I am watching very, very closely. Again, as far as 2022, and none of those options are on the table. This is the deck of cards, that Mickey Loomis and Mrs. Benson have to play with for the rest of this year.
Yeah, and that to me, that's the big thing, because they're not going to make a coaching change midseason. They're just not. There's no getting around that. People want to see, because they saw the Colts fire Frank Reich, and you've seen, Matt Rule shouldn't even come back for this season with Carolina. But you don't have a first round pick. So it's at this point, if you were to fire these guys and you have an interim head coach, first off, who's going to be interim head coach? You fire Dennis Allen right now.
One of your 4 defensive coordinators, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Right. So what's going to happen? You just play out the string and you go ahead and give the Eagles a top 5 pick, because that's what happens.
Right.
The Saints signed Derek Gore.
Yes.
Somebody say I thought I read somebody said he was the grandson of Frank Gore. I don't think that's accurate.
I wrote the article for us, and I know I didn't write those words. I just, as far as my knowledge goes, they just have the same last name. I don't think they're related.
Yeah. I mean, I know he's played in the league for a long time, but here's the thing too. Brian, I've been seeing your messages. Here's what happens though if you fire Dennis Allen, and I'm worried about. Oh, it's a meme. My son said it's a meme right now. Okay. Here's what happens if you fire Dennis Allen right now. Okay. Right now, the New Orleans Saints are not a destination for players to want to come to. They're a small market, very limited opportunities to make money compared to larger markets. Fire Dennis Allen after 1 year, and you replace him with who? And this is what we talked about earlier, Brian. Who do you replace him with? Okay. If you blow that hire, and I'm not saying you will, but if you blow that hire, now this organization becomes a revolving door of coaches. That is a major nail in your coffin.
Yeah.
To make this an appealing franchise. You cannot become the Jets or the Browns or the Jaguars. You just can't. So you have to show Deion Sanders. No, I don't think Deion Sanders. That's a hell of a leap from HBCUs to the NFL. College coaches have major programs, and I'm talking Steve Spurrier, Nick Saban had a hell of a time jumping from college to the pros. There's a reason why very, very few successful college coaches succeed at the NFL level. Lou Holtz only made it 7 games into the Jets before they fired him. It's I think they give Dennis Allen. We said this before. I think they give Dennis Allen another year, make some sacrificial assistant coaches fall on the sword. He gets another year to see if it's any better. Dicker got 3, and that was 6-10,
Right.
6-10, 3-13, and he fired him at the end of a 3-13 season. Um, well, yeah, I mean, Brian's like, okay, Dennis Allen's record is what it is, so we'll be in football purgatory for 2 seasons or until he leaves. Yeah, you will be. You're gonna be in football purgatory until you find a franchise quarterback.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, it's not necessarily on the coach. And Brian, listen, I'm not. Although I advocated the hire of Dennis Allen and I liked it at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I now I as it stands right now, I do not believe that he is head coaching material. I think he is a Wade Phillips. I think he is a
Yes.
guy best suited to be a coordinator. But
Mm-hmm.
it is what it is. And and Allen has said this too. We both said time and time again. Dennis Allen isn't missing tackles out there. Dennis Allen isn't fumbling the football. Dennis Allen isn't overthrowing wide receivers or failing to pick up the blitzes. Not all of this is on the coach. You do need to find a franchise quarterback, and you're going to be in purgatory until you can find a capable postseason quarterback. He doesn't even have to be a franchise quarterback, but if you can find a Derek Carr or a Matthew Stafford, and until you find at least that, you're going to be in purgatory. To go along with that, yeah, you need good coaches. And it's not just the head coach. You need capable coordinators too. And right now, this entire staff is struggling with that. But I'm with Alan. I don't think that they're going to clean house. Unless this team goes 0 for or 1 for the rest of the year. I don't see it happening.
And Brian, we talked about this earlier in the show, and you're welcome to go back and watch it again. But I talked about the terrible coaching around the league, and these are proven coaches. Sean McVay with the Rams is terrible, horrible coaching. Todd Bowles in Tampa, terrible coaching. Um, you know, just go down the list of all these underachieving and poorly. And Matt LaFleur at Green Bay, terrible coaching. The Chargers coach, Nathaniel Hackett in Denver, um, Josh McDaniels, who I despise,
Mm-hmm.
in Las Vegas, um, the Cleveland Browns head coach. It's just you just go looking down the list at all these terrible coaches and terrible coaching jobs. Ron Rivera, he's trying in Washington. He's in a no-win situation, but he's trying. But it's not a very good coaching job.
Mm-mm.
Um, that's not to say some of these new coaches, the Minnesota coach, the Jets coach, Robert Saleh, who I do like, but
Mm-hmm.
Robert Saleh is starting to turn it around in New York. The
I love
Giants,
the job that Sirianni is doing in Philadelphia.
yeah. It's not to say these young coaches aren't doing it and doing well, but I'm saying a lot of guys that we are seeing um, that have had the resumes of being great coaches and offensive minded coaches and just have won a lot of games are terrible. Detroit, well, we don't have to go into Detroit. Detroit is Detroit. Um, yeah, um, so I think the Saints look at that and look at all these coaches out there and go, I don't know who is out there that they can go grab to bring in to replace Dennis Allen, who they feel like will do a better job. And I know that's ridiculous to say for some people, but I don't think they see it. Um, yeah, yeah, the Raiders interim coach did do a better job, Josh McDaniels. Well, first off, Josh McDaniels has no business ever being a head coach. Every
Mm-mm.
time his name came out, I'm like, go to Atlanta. I want to win every time we play you because I know we will.
Yeah.
But you stink as a head coach. Yeah, Bruce Arians. Oh God. Um, yeah, it's Jim Moore. He just celebrated his 89th birthday or his
Mm-hmm.
90th birthday. The guy looks really good for
He
being
does.
his age. And yeah, it's just it's tough, and I get it because we're all frustrated because we're losing, and a lot of people aren't used to losing. But you know, there's something to be said about, oh no, 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 Brian. I blame Jim Moore Jr. for the 1996 season for us not getting the Ohio State running back Eddie George.
Yep.
I blame him for that. I do not like Jim Moore Jr. I
No.
enjoy knowing that we did the pump block and the reopening of the dome, the rebirth against Jim Moore Jr. I do not like Jim Moore Jr.
Jim, Kyle and I had the pleasure of interviewing him twice, and he's a fun guy to talk to. He's actually a good football mind, very charismatic. But I don't want him on the coaching staff of my team, let alone heading up that coaching staff.
Yeah. Jim Moore Sr., if he just didn't have Carl Smith, I think we could have done something. But you know, Carl Smith was an albatross around his neck. We'll see after this year. I'm not going to put my neck out on the line and say he will not be fired, but I feel like you, Bob, you know, barring him going on a 9-game losing streak for the rest of the season, I just don't see it happening. There's 3 divisional games, all beatable opponents. The team we play next week, Pittsburgh, with you know, and this is an organization that's just the polar opposite of the way the fans are reacting right now. Yeah, here's another clown I hate, Lane Kiffin.
Mm-hmm.
But the Steelers have had 3 head coaches since 1969. That's longer than most people have been alive. Okay. 2 of the 3 are in the NFL Hall of Fame, Bill Cowher and Chuck Noll. And I would honestly not be surprised to see Mike Tomlin in there afterwards. He's never had a losing season until maybe this year.
Yeah, he's going to this year.
Yeah. An amazing track record of stability. You live in this area. What is the secret to the Steelers in this stability? It's not just the Rooneys. There's some sort of secret to that team that they never, even when Cowher had losing seasons, it never was, Cowher's got to go. We're going to blow this whole team up. We've got to start from scratch, fire everybody. Why is that? I mean, Pittsburgh used to be like the Saints. They never won anything for 42 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what is the secret to this team?
Well, and don't get me wrong, there's a large portion of the drunken Yinzer fan base that are drinking out of the Ohio River water. And by the way, that's what Iron City beer is. It's Ohio River water. Mm-hmm. There's a portion that they wanted Chuck Noll fired in the mid '80s. They wanted Bill Cowher fired. Sorry, I'll channel my inner Yinzer. They wanted Bill Cowher fired. If he lost 2 games in a row, and they've wanted Mike Tomlin fired since the day he accepted the job. Now, in Mike Tomlin's case, there's a lot of racial bias behind it, and there's no way that you can convince me otherwise. But yeah, nonetheless, there's still a big dysfunctional portion of the fan base. But as far as the secret, like you said, it's more than just continuity. They know how to make hires. And Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and even Mike Tomlin were kind of lower profile guys. They all played in the league for a very brief amount of time. You never remember them as a player ever. Like, you have to Google them to realize that they even played in the NFL at all. But yeah, they came in to coaching with a very baseline approach, as far as these are the kind of players that I am looking for. I am looking for hard-nosed players that are both physically and mentally tough, that are going to fight for me, that are going to fight for each other, and that are going to be loyal to their teammates. And that's why a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers teams, even from the Noll days, have looked very similar almost every single year. Mm-hmm. You have your stars, and you're obviously a boatload of Hall of Famers over the years. But even Mike Tomlin's bad teams, even Bill Cowher's bad teams, they would battle you almost every single week. And like I said, it's a very consistent based approach that that has stayed true to form. They have not the Roonies, and I'll go back to the Roonies. They have not fallen for the flavor of the month. This guy's the hot coaching candidate, and our guy went 7-9 last year. We're gonna blow everything up because this new guy's the answer. Or our quarterback it might have struggled a little bit, might have thrown more interceptions than we like. We're going to can this whole thing and mortgage our entire future on this quarterback that had one good year of college football. They have always stayed very consistent with their approach. It might not be flashy, but it's won this franchise a handful of Super Bowls and had them in contention for at least a playoff spot literally just about every single year.
Absolutely. The thing, I was just getting ready to say that because towards the end of Chuck Noll's run, and I'm talking about the late 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of, it's time for Chuck to go. Same thing, because the Steelers weren't winning anymore. And you're talking about consistency. Chuck Noll famously passed on Dan Marino to go take, and I just forgot his name, with the defensive tackle.
Gabe Rivera.
Thank you. To take Gabe Rivera, because that's how he built the 70s Steelers. He started in '69 with Mean Joe Green, and Gabe Rivera played from a small college just like Mean Joe Green did. In fact, Joe Green is so respected by his college that they changed their nickname at North Texas to the North Texas Mean Green. So he felt like that's where I was going with this. I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to replace Joe Green with Gabe Rivera, and then I'll get my quarterback #1 overall maybe next year and build from there. Now, of course, he had Mark Malone, Tom Selleck's doppelganger. He had Mark Malone at quarterback, and I think he still had Cliff Stout.
He did. Cliff, he went to the USFL.
Oh, that's right. He did. I forgot about that. But, and Bradshaw, of course, really needed Tommy John surgery in his elbow, but he didn't. I don't think Tommy John surgery existed yet, but his elbow was shot. So, there wasn't that pressure to get Dan Marino, and unfortunately, that was a critical mistake that could have set the Steelers up to be as competitive or in the playoffs again consistently like they were in the 70s. Yeah, we'll see. You're talking about Sean Payton going to the Panthers. I don't know about that. But unfortunately, Gabe Rivera got into a car accident his rookie year, and he was paralyzed from that. And it seemed like the Steelers never recovered. They got Bubby Brister not long after the Mark Malone experiment failed. I heard that too. And I was going to talk a little bit about that. I just didn't know when to bring this up.
We don't have time. I'm tired.
Yeah, I know. I think Peyton was trying to make a joke.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because Lamar isn't going anywhere. He's going to get his money. And they pretty much said that on the broadcast last night. So Peyton, I want him to go to the Chargers because I want him in the AFC, and I want him to go to the Chargers because I like the Chargers, and I think him pairing up with Justin Herbert is what he wants. He wants to go to an organization where he can really do something. But I don't see him going to the Panthers. And first off, the Panthers are probably going to have the #1 overall draft pick. So they're not going to give you a #1 pick for Sean Payton. So, you might as well forget that because they're not going to sacrifice that pick. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what kind of bounty Sean would even get.
That's
Because,
it. And everybody assumes
Mhm.
that if Peyton coaches next year, that the Saints will get a #1 draft choice. Folks, that's far from written in stone.
Mhm.
This is going to be a trade, just like anything else, and there's going to be negotiations. It would not surprise me if Sean Payton were traded to his next coaching destination for a #2, maybe a couple #2s, or a #2 and a #3, because more than likely, whatever team gets Sean Payton, pursues Sean Payton, is going to have a top 10 draft choice or higher. They're not going to want to part with that so easily.
Yeah.
So it might be a compensation such as, all right, New Orleans, we're going to give you our #2 this year, which if it's high, essentially is a late first round pick.
Mhm.
Our #2 this year, and either a #3 or a #1 for 2024, because we feel like Sean Payton's going to make that big a deal. That's what I'd negotiate for anyway. And if you're the New Orleans Saints, do you say no when the alternative is being stuck with the lack of draft picks that you have now,
Yeah.
pissing off Sean Payton, to the point where Sean negotiates some kind of buyout anyway and goes somewhere, and you get nothing out of it? It's got to be something here. So I'm with you, Alan. I still expect Sean will land in, with the Chargers. My B team is still the Arizona Cardinals. To me, those are my top 2 favorites for Sean Payton. And I don't think he'll land there, but do not be surprised if the Indianapolis Colts make a hard run for Sean.
Oh, and I think that's probably the reason why they fired Reich when they did. The problem with the Colts is they have no quarterback.
Right, and they have an Irsay as an owner, so.
Yeah. Sean wants to go to a team that's got a young quarterback in place already. I think Sean's dream would be Andy Reid to retire after this year, and he can go play. He can go for the Kansas City Chiefs.
And I don't discount that at all either. Not at all.
Yeah. And he gets his Patrick Mahomes after all. Well, the segue I really want to do when talking about the Steelers is I want to talk about this matchup. This is probably the most winnable game that's left on the Saints schedule, next to the divisional games against the Falcons and the Panthers,
right,
and the Bucks to an extent, but the Falcons and the Panthers. But non-divisional game, I think this game against Pittsburgh, if they don't win this game, I don't see them winning maybe 1 or 2 games the rest of the year. How do you feel about this game coming up?
I feel the same way as you. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a bad football team. That's the good news. The bad news is TJ Watt's going to play this Sunday. They activated him. He's back. They either activated him or he's about to be activated off of IR. He's already practicing. It'll be on a limited snap count. But my God, with the amount of sacks and pressures that the Saints have given up at times this year, to have TJ Watt coming after, I don't care who's back there behind center. That's a terrifying thought. Because with Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick, the Steelers have 2 legitimate playmakers that can win a football game against just about any team. Outside of that, Kenny Pickett, who I did not have confidence in going into the 2022 draft. Kenny Pickett's going to probably be their starter. Definitely this Sunday and probably the rest of the season. But the Steelers, we just talked about the Steeler way, and I hate that term. But we'll use it. We'll use it for the argument's purposes. We've talked about the Steeler way over the years. Building on both offensive lines, or both lines. Being tough in the trenches. That's the last thing this Steeler team has been in the last 4 or 5 years, really. They're an absolute disaster along the offensive line. Najee Harris is a quality running back, but you wouldn't know it by his numbers this year. And he's beat up. He's dealing with a Liz Frank injury. They can't protect their quarterback, and they have limited offensive weapons. Pat Freiermuth is as good a tight end as you'll find. George Pickens might be the steal of the draft, And Deontay Johnson is overrated. I know I piss off Steeler fans when I say this because he'll make 4 catches, but he'll drop 3. But Deontay could still make plays down the field. So the Steelers have the weapons to beat you. But more often than not, the reason that they could win or stay in the games is because they make you beat yourself. That's what scares me about this game, because we know that the Saints, they make a hobby out of beating themselves on paper. And it was funny because there was tons of Steeler fans in my mentions on Twitter, not followers, not family members. They was just popping up on my timeline. The Steeler fans are saying the same exact thing that the Saints fans were saying after the Ravens game last night. Saints fans were saying, man, we're in sad shape if we can't beat this pathetic Steeler team. The Steeler fans were saying all the exact same things. Man, this team's season is done at 2-6. They're already done. But this team is in a pathetic state of affairs if they can't beat this sad-ass Saints team. So it is hilarious, the state of both of these franchises right now. The difference is Pittsburgh thinks they have their franchise quarterback, and they're trying to build around him. That's the big difference between these two teams right now.
Yeah, and I think Pickett has the capabilities to be a good quarterback for them, but I don't know about a franchise quarterback. He's not. I don't think he is a Ben Roethlisberger or Terry Bradshaw or anything like that. I think he is more of, I don't want to say Neil O'Donnell because that's not fair, but he has the ability to be kind of like a Mike Tomczak, Neil O'Donnell,
Tommy Maddox.
Tommy Maddox, yeah. Tommy Maddox is another name that comes to mind. Somebody who can win for you for a little while, but you're going to be looking for an upgrade.
And that's what I told Steeler fans the night that they drafted him, because I hated everything, and I saw a lot of Kenny Pickett up here. I hated everything that I saw on film, other than the fact he's a gamer. Yeah, he's a competitor. He's a fiery leader. But I agree with you. I think if the right pieces are around him, you could see a couple playoff runs out of him. He's that kind of quality. But at the same time, if you're a team that's starved for a franchise quarterback, you're going to be looking for one again in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, and that was the thing about this draft class. You see Malik Willis out there with Tennessee. He's not a passer at all. That's how raw he is. Bo Nix, and this is so funny. Malik Willis was a quarterback for Auburn. He goes over to Liberty and becomes a hot commodity. Bo Nix was at Auburn. He goes over to Oregon, and now everybody's like, "Ooh, Bo Nix might be a first or second round draft pick next year." It's like, this is Bo Nix. Look what he looked like in Auburn.
Right.
Brian Russell mentioned Geno Smith. The funny thing about Geno Smith to me is what people thought Jameis Winston could be for the Saints, and he's not. And I don't know if he could ever be that. I think Geno Smith has got a 4-leaf clover tattooed on his butt right now. He is that kind of player, but because I don't think this is sustainable. He's having a 1990 era Steve DeBerg kind of year, where things are just falling just right for him. That he is making these plays. I don't see him long term that way, but you're still thinking that you can get a playoff run out of Geno Smith right now, and I think Pete Carroll probably has a good argument for being coach of the year.
I'd agree with that. And it looks like Seattle is in control of the NFC West at the moment. So there's no reason to believe that if they can't sustain, even if they win, say, 4 more games, they're in prime playoff position. And I think Steve DeBerg is an excellent comparison. I was thinking Vinny Testaverde when Vinny had his mini rebirth with the New York Jets and Bill Parcells.
Yeah.
It's a very similar comparison. But anybody that wants, and Geno Smith is playing decent football, I will give him that. But anybody that wants Geno Smith in a New Orleans Saints uniform for 2023, folks, I thought you wanted to get out of purgatory. That's not the way to do it.
Well, names coming up right now, Hendon Hooker and Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, Bryce Young in Alabama. I'm even seeing the kid from LSU's name showing up now. The kid from Ohio State. Here's the problem in all these quarterbacks. Quarterbacks get overdrafted every year. Kenny Pickett is a good example of somebody getting overdrafted. Probably a second-round pick, and he got taken in the first. Geno Smith was taken in the second. He probably was more of a third-round pick. This is such a quarterback-driven league. I can see, especially Hendon Hooker, who I think Georgia pretty much slammed the door in his Heisman hopes. But these guys are going to get overdrafted next year, so we'll see who's available at the top of the second round. But I'm not putting my hopes out that you're going to get a quarterback in the second round.
No, I agree with that. And this is certainly plenty of off-season conversation and definitely a conversation for another day. But the more likely scenario is watching to see if a quarterback that was expected to go in the middle part of the first round slips to the 20s. And if that's the case and you're the Saints, you probably have the ammunition at that point to sacrifice future number one draft choices to move up and get him and keep your fingers crossed that you might have hit on something.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I think they look hard at quarterbacks next year in the draft. Obviously, I still think they get they look for a transitional guy for next year. And I know Saints fans hate hearing that name, but like we said, Garoppolo's a name to watch. Derek Carr is a name to watch.
Trubisky.
Yeah, Trubisky. Although I just, they had a shot at him this year and they were interested in him, but the kid who's actually playing in Cleveland right now, Jacoby Brissett. I'm not saying. I think if you go and get a Jacoby Brissett, you're pretty much locked into drafting a quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just something. It just depends on how this draft class falls out. Jared Goff, I don't know, Jared Goff. The problem with Jared Goff is the Lions have nothing, so they're gonna hang on to Jared Goff until they get something. That's probably another team that's gonna be looking for a new head coach. So that's all off-season talk. Okay, so my thing on the Steelers, going back to the Steelers, I think this is a winnable game. I think this is the week they probably right the ship, because if you look at this schedule, it's win one, lose two, win one, lose one, win one. This is the week that they win one. I think they do take the Steelers, and I think they do win this game. It's not going to be a dominant performance, far from a shutout. I think this is going to be one of those close games, but I think they're going to want to make a statement after being embarrassed on Monday Night Football. I think this is a game where the defense really plays up to their ability. Get some pressure on Pickett, get some sacks. I think Kamara can outrun this defense. And I think it all depends on who comes back healthy. I mean, you got a lot of holes you got to fill. We lost 3 people last night. You lost Pete Werner, which was like the most serious. You lost Marcus Davenport and Eric McCoy. If McCoy can play, and he was the least injured of the 3, if McCoy can play, I think this is the game that he probably could come back and play. I don't know who's going to play wide receiver. It seems like Jarvis Landry really should be on IR. He has not responded to any kind of treatment at all for his foot. So it's all about Chris Olave again.
Yeah, it is. And fortunately, the Steelers have given up some big passing numbers. But again, you got to protect the quarterback. I will say this: Andy Dalton has always played well against the Pittsburgh Steelers when he was with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll see an efficient performance from Andy. But they got to protect the passer. Other than that, I see what you said. I see this as a get right game for the Saints defensive line. I think they'll put up some nice numbers, some good sack numbers, against Kenny Pickett. And they should be able to control the Steelers running game. I say should, but they've given up boatloads of yards to third and fourth string running backs all year. So because of that, even though the Steelers are a bad team, I'll borrow Dennis Green's saying, we are who they thought they are, who we thought they were. But guess what? We are also who they think we are, and that is a bad football team. That you're talking a 3-6 football team here, and they have played every bit like it. So I expect that this will be an ugly game. The Saints have played very well when they've come to Pittsburgh throughout their history, but it's going to be a cold day. Going to be cold, gloomy, Western Pennsylvania special. So I'd expect it to be a game in the low 20s or maybe high teens.
Yeah. All right. So last thing before we go, today is the 52nd anniversary of Tom Dempsey kick, which was the highlight of the 70s and 60s Saints teams. In fact, the highlight until Jim Moore really came around. 63-yard field goal. It's been broken since, but it's still an important kick considering his disabilities, considering where he kicked that ball from. Essentially, I think it was a 35-yard line because the goalposts back then were on the goal line. But yeah, I still like acknowledging that kick in that event because it was such a historical thing. I encourage everybody to get on YouTube and look up Tom Dempsey's 63-yard field goal. You've all seen the NFL Films version of it with Al Wester, the Saints radio guy back then, doing the call. But you really need to find the broadcast, the television broadcast, Don Criqui calling it, because him saying, he's laughing. He's about to kick a 63-yard field goal, and then when that ball hits, he goes, I don't believe it. Oh my God, it's good. And it's just, it really captures the emotion far more than Al Wester. So, man, Brian, I am not a fan of Coastal Carolina at all. I went for UL, so I'm not a fan of him at all. I have to really watch him, seriously. I have not watched Coastal Carolina because UL's not having a good year either. Real quick, Bob, what do you have on tomorrow night for the Bayou Blitz?
Brent, I tried to get Craig Wolfley. He's a friend of mine and the Steelers color radio analyst. But Craig's schedule is a little bit tied up. And I wanted to get Craig on with another good friend of mine. And he will be coming on. His name's Rudy Reyes. He does YouTube the Rude Dog Show. He's a national radio host. I don't even remember what radio station he is with now, but he's been kind of one of my mentors in this industry, along with you and Sean. Rudy is a lifelong Steelers fan, so I know he'll have some choice words to say about Mike Tomlin and crew. I'm real anxious to have Rudy on. I think it's going to be he's going to give us a good show. He himself puts on a good product, so make sure you tune in for that one.
Absolutely. Well, good, good. I encourage everybody to go check out Bob's other show, the Bayou Blitz. It's a really good show. I sound like Ed Sullivan here. It's a really good show. No, it's fun. It's informative. It's a little bit different than our podcast, but that's good. That's what you want. So we
I
don't.
can't be quite as outspoken. I try, but I can't be quite as outspoken on mine because the Sports Illustrated execs pay a little bit more attention since we're sponsored by the Saints News Network. So I have to be a tiny bit closer to PG rated on that one.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. In the meantime, check out his show. It's a fun podcast, and Brian, the season's not quite over yet. You still have to play it out. Even if you want to pretend like it's the off season, you still have to play out these games. We're still going to talk about it. I think this will be the last time the Saints shoot their mouth off about wanting to have a late bye week. That's for damn sure.
Right.
Week 13 is a hell of a bye week, but we'll see. I think the pendulum swings this week, and we're back to we can still win this thing. Atlanta's going to lose again. Tampa's going to lose again. Carolina lost again. So I mean, it's going to be bipolar for a while. In the meantime, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.